Hi, my name is Isabella Alkhas, and I'm going to be doing my presentation on Dr. Sharlene Santana. So, Dr. Santana was born in Venezuela, and she grew up there with the floral and fauna biodiversity, which sparked her interest in ecology and biology at an early age. Then she finished her bachelor's degree in biology at the Universidad de los Andes in Venezuela, and then afterwards she moved to the United States and got her PhD in organismic and evolutionary biology at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. While she faced many challenges as an international student, like language barriers, culture shocks, and just moving to a whole new place all on her own, she overcame them and now currently works as a professor of biology and the curator of mammals at the Berg Museum in the University of Washington. So some of her hobbies and interests outside of research include fieldwork and photography. She posts a lot on her social media of the bats. And she does a lot of science outreach, specific for underrepresented minority students in STEM, like Native Americans. And she also leads a public project called Pocket Bats, which is an app that's basically designed for educational purposes. Basically, you use Augment to create realistic textured models of bats so students can learn from them. So why I admire Charlene? I admire her passion, dedication to her field, and I like how connected she is to her subjects of natural history, ecology, and evolution. And I also really respect how she was able to move from her home country, Venezuela, all the way to the United States and basically start life all over again as a foreigner. And I also identify a lot with her curiosity surrounding nature and bats, which is really similar to mine. With the exception that I'm more interested in turtles and amphibians, but I also find bats as a very interesting species as well. So I identify a lot with that. So the field of biology that she works with is basically sensory and evolutionary ecology, focusing a lot more on bats and plant animal interactions and sensory ecology. She studies how form and function develop. So basically, she looks at bats and fruiting plants and sees how skull shape, feeding behavior, and sensory cues can affect these interactions. Her lab specifically asks the question of why or how do bat species adapt their feeding and sensory systems to their diets. So the paper that I looked at from her was is called Fruit Odorants Mediate Co-Specialization in a Multi-Species Plant Animal Mutualism. So in other words, she shows how like fruit scents, specifically in piper plants, evolve and how that has an effect on how often fruiting bats consume them. So if you look at these panels, the first panel shows the evolutionary diagram or a phylogenetic tree of these piper species, like how they've evolved, and basically just lists a bunch of species. And then and like how the sense has changed. And then the middle one shows the presence and absence of these three um key scent compounds, VOCs, which make up each fruit scent. And then the last panel talks about how often these bats consume them based on their fecal samples. So what she's uncovered so far is how bats and fruit, like bat-fruit relationships are chemically mediated, and fruit odor can drive which species interacts and consumes them. She's also linked jaw and sh skull shape to the feeding mechanics and ecological specialization. But her next steps include looking at the molecular basis of smell in bats and studying how these sensory ecological traits can co-evolve across a bat family tree. Um, and yeah, basically, Charlene Santana is a integrative evolutionary biologist. She started her work as in Venezuela, moving to the United States, and she focuses a lot more evolutionary ecology, sensory biology, and functional morphology of bats, which show how trait interactions or how interactions can shape trait evolutions. So as I talked about, the paper earlier showed VOC profiles, bat diets, behavior preference trials, and phylogenetic comparative models. These are the references that I used, primary sources and secondary sources, whatever. And I really hope that you enjoyed my presentation and you learned something new about this amazing woman, Sharlene Santana. Thank you.